Hello there, I am Ace1918, and in this episode of Learning Battlefield 1918 we are going to learn the basics of the infantry, as well as provide a basic overview of the role of each of the various spawnable classes, and a quick look at some of the elite pickup kits that players may find in this mod. But first, let's look at why the infantry are so important in Battlefield 1918, in particular in comparison to other mods for Battlefield 1942. And there are a few reasons as to why this is the case. For a start, a good number of maps within Battlefield 1918 are very much infantry focused, and so being able to rely on vehicles in order to carry your way to victory is not always an option. Secondly, and as already mentioned in my very first video of learning Battlefield 1918, certain weapon systems such as artillery outright require spotters, which is a key role that certain infantry classes provide. Thirdly, and just as important, is the fact that some of the most powerful and effective weapons within the mod are actively in the hands of elite pickup kits, and therefore are within the domain of the infantry. So with that out of the way, let's look at some of the spawnable kit classes the player has access to within Battlefield 1918. And what better way to start off than with the Rifleman class? In Battlefield 1918, the Rifleman class should be considered the great all-rounder, capable of fulfilling just about any task given to them. This is of course reflected in the equipment that the class provides, giving players access to a rifle that can have an attached bayonet, along with a secondary melee weapon and 3 hand grenades. It is easily one of the best classes for beginners to learn, and remains useful even for veteran players as well, as the ample supply of hand grenades makes the Rifleman class especially well suited to clearing enemy trenches. Furthermore, being able to fire the rifle with the bayonet still fixed allows the class a certain advantage in melee fights as well. One thing to keep in mind is that there is a second variation of this Rifleman class that may be available to certain early war variations of factions, known as the Reserve Rifleman class. This variation of the class replaces the magazine-fed rifle with a single-shot breech-loading rifle instead. But let's move on to another good class for beginners, specifically the Officer class, which excels at the roles of both team play and close quarters fighting. But to best understand why this is the case, we must look at their equipment. For a start, the typical officer within Battlefield 1918 is equipped with a rapid-fire pistol that is absolutely lethal within the close quarters fighting of the trenches. To back this up, they also tend to have access to a melee weapon that can range anywhere from a small detached bayonet all the way up to a proper sword. But while this explains their proficiency at close quarters fighting, let's also look at the 2 other pieces of equipment which explain their team role. The first is the whistle, which actually provides an area of effect resupply of both health and ammo to nearby teammates. When used correctly, this can provide an absolutely decisive advantage to the team, as can the other piece of equipment, which is the binoculars. As already mentioned, artillery players need spotters at the front lines to be able to even see the targets that they're aiming at. And with the ability to call in targets for the artillery, the officer is able to fulfill that role quite well. And on that subject, let's discuss another class that can fulfill that role quite well, the Reconnaissance class. However, despite also being equipped with binoculars, the Reconnaissance class itself fulfills a very different role within Battlefield 1918, as it's meant to engage enemies from a distance. This is exemplified by the fact that the Reconnaissance class is typically equipped with a scoped rifle that requires the user to actually go prone before being accurate. In addition, the Reconnaissance class can only rely on a melee weapon to defend themselves within close quarters. So while this class does indeed fit a niche role, it can nevertheless be an important one for the team. For a skilled reconnaissance player can not only spot targets for the artillery, but they could also actively pick off enemy machine gunners and perhaps even enemy artillery crew, effectively denying the enemy team valuable equipment that they could use to otherwise repulse an attack. One important thing to keep in mind, however, when playing the Reconnaissance class is that bullet damage does tend to drop off with range, so it may be necessary to aim for the head to guarantee a kill with one shot. But moving on, let's talk about the other class that requires players to go prone before being accurate, the Light Machine Gunner class. As the name implies, this class does of course come equipped with the light machine gun as its primary weapon. However, to back this up, light machine gunners also have access to a single hand grenade as well as a melee weapon, for those situations in a melee fight when the player simply doesn't have time to go prone, or needs to help out in clearing an enemy trench first. Of course, what the light machine gunner excels at doing is fighting off attacking infantry. be it enemy infantry charging across no man's land or just as importantly securing a sector of a trench. Either way, the light machine gunner is one of the best classes for that particular role. But one may be wondering now what a player is to do once the enemy decides to start adding vehicles into the equation. And that, dear viewer, is where the Pioneer class comes into play. Now, at a glance, the Pioneer class may itself actually seem quite similar to the Rifleman class, but what may on paper seem like quite small differences are actually quite notable in practice. For a start, instead of being equipped with a full-on rifle, the Pioneer class itself tends to be equipped with a carbine. These still tend to be quite lethal and accurate, however the damage drop-off for them tends to be more noticeable than with rifles, so Pioneer players will want to aim for the upper torso and head to guarantee a kill. However, and as already mentioned, the true strength of the Pioneer class is in dealing with enemy vehicles, and this is demonstrated by the types of grenades that they tend to carry, which can be divided into two categories. The first are percussion grenades, which explode on impact. Pioneer kits that are equipped with these have access to 3 when they spawn, and as one may guess, these do notably more damage against enemy vehicles than standard fragmentation grenades. However, there is one notable drawback to these, as they have notably less splash damage, making them far less effective against enemy infantry. The second type of anti-vehicle grenade available to the Pioneer kits can be best described as the heavy-duty grenades. These too have a number of notable drawbacks, such as a noticeably longer fuse time in comparison to standard fragmentation grenades and a much shorter throwing range. In addition, Pioneer kits equipped with these type of grenades only have access to 2 when they spawn. On the other hand, not only do these types of grenades cause far more damage to enemy vehicles, but they also have massive splash damage as well, meaning that they can also be used to clear out large areas of enemy trench. One final note for Pioneer players that use these types of grenades is that they should run away as soon as they throw the grenade to avoid getting hit by the splash damage. So these are the 5 main kits that players are able to spawn into in Battlefield 1918. However, and as veteran players already know, there are a few maps that replace some of these kits with alternatives, so let's look at some of those. First up is the Patrol Kit. This kit can be viewed as a cross between the Reconnaissance and Rifleman classes, losing both the bayonet and 2 of the 3 grenades that the Rifleman kit has access to, while at the same time also losing the scope of the rifle that the Reconnaissance kit has. Still, this particular kit has access to binoculars, allowing it to spot for artillery, and the addition of a single grenade still gives it more utility in close quarters fighting than the Reconnaissance class. The other alternative spawnable kit is the Medic class, which can be seen as a sort of cross between the Rifleman class and the Officer class. While losing access to the bayonet and 2 of the 3 grenades the Rifleman has access to, the Medic class gains the ability to perform an additional team role by healing teammates and themselves. So now that we're done with the spawnable kits, let's instead have a quick overview of some of the elite pickup kits, of which there are simply far too many of them to cover in depth in one single video. But we can at least put them all into 2 distinct categories. The first are direct combat pickup kits. These can be equipped with unique weapons such as flamethrowers or submachine guns. They can also be equipped with tons of hand grenades, or they can even be equipped with body armor. But overall, the purpose of these kits is to give the player themselves an advantage against their opponents. But don't let the advantages of these kits go to your head, as even the kits that are equipped with body armor do not make you completely impervious to enemy fire. But let's move on to the second category of elite pickup kits, and these are the sort that benefit the team in general, and aren't themselves directly focused on engaging the enemy. Kits of this nature can be equipped with things like smoke grenades, or be able to deploy defenses such as barbed wire or anti-tank mines, or even have the ability to call off-board artillery strikes. Kits of this nature also may have the ability to allow players to deploy mortars and heavy machine guns into positions where they most need them. One thing to keep in mind for players that wish to use these kinds of kits, however, is that they should try to deploy the mortars or heavy machine guns on relatively flat ground, and they should especially try to avoid deploying them within trenches or buildings. And while I did mention that elite support kits tend to not be directly combat focused themselves, they may still be equipped with weapons that allow them to put up a considerable fight in certain circumstances, so players that chance upon them should never underestimate them. But with that said, I can now conclude this video on the topic of infantry. I should mention that the rest of the Battlefield 1918 development team, as well as myself, do hope to see you all again soon. But until that time comes, this has been Ace, and thank you for your time.